Hello, icons. Great to be back with you. We've been doing these weekly broadcasts to give you some confidence going into this sort of new season, if you will. It's been fantastic. And this is basically our first interview with none other than Tony Hewitt. And let me tell you about Tony Hewitt in case you've been living under a rock. Tony has been integral part of our team in the leadership group to really help us be guided by, I guess, the principles of integrity, education, and his knowledge. I really believe in the competition space is really second to none, and that's why we heed his counsel. We've been talking to him for so many years. But he's a fellow Australian. He's won pretty much every single award that's out there. The incredible thing about Tony is not only has he been doing it for over 3 decades, but he really has mastered pretty much every genre that he's doing. It's wedding photography, portrait photography, commercial, landscape. The list goes on. I'll let Tony sort of tell you a bit more about what he does. Today, specifically, we're talking about what makes a standout image. So how to make your images outstanding. And just recently, in fact, Tony Hewitt, no surprise, in New Zealand won the Australian Photographer of the Year, the Iris Awards, and he's the current WA, Western Australia. Think of a state in Australia that's bigger than Texas. He is the current holder of the Photographer of the Year in his state, apart from winning the national one, and also the Landscape Photographer of the Year. And the unique thing about Tony is really that he's actually been involved on every level so many times in so many organizations, involved still as an entrant where he can, certainly around the world, in terms of chairing, judging, and running awards. His experience is incredible. And we thought that the first person that we're actually going to bring along here for you guys and to learn from is going to be Tony Hewitt. And if you've been privy to the actual chairing of the judging that happened, the live final judging on those 2 days at WPPI, you would have seen Tony just crush it. He was amazing, managing all the judges and really celebrating the photographers. So that was incredible, and also being part of the critiques on the trade show floor. So Tony, good day, mate. It's great to have you all the way from Western Australia in the Southern Hemisphere, and you are from the future right now, I believe.
I am, mate. I am. It's now Tuesday morning, so welcome to Tuesday morning. I can tell you it's a good day, and you've got something to look forward to when you wake up in the morning. For those of you in the good old USA and other parts of the Northern Hemisphere, yeah, thanks, Jerry. Appreciate that intro, and I love you guys, and I've loved being a part of it. And yeah, it's an interesting journey to go from an entrant back in sort of 19 something. That doesn't matter back then. And then and starting out and the very first competition I ever entered, getting smashed, getting nothing and being devastated. But from there I've sort of built on that, and I've learned a lot of things, and having the opportunity and the privilege to provide or give back, if you like, in terms of judging, chairing, running organisations, and like yourself, just getting involved in making sure that the community has a vehicle upon which we can help educate, inspire, motivate, and share the sort of imagery that's out there at the cutting edge. Why would you want to be doing anything else? So yeah, thanks for having me. Great privilege. Thank you.
Thank you, mate. And it's incredible because every time so Tony, I ran you like a week or 2 weeks ago, and in a real sentence, what did you say to me in a real sentence about where you were, what you were doing, and what was happening? Because you said it so flippantly, and I'm like, and I said to you, who says this in a real sentence? And it's their life, and I'm speaking to that man. So tell us a bit about what you've been up to the last.
Well, we had been at the Iris Awards in South New Zealand. I was with Peter Eastway, and if people don't know Peter Eastway, look him up. He's one of the best photographers in this country and one of the greatest educators we've had. But anyway, I've been there, but I couldn't attend the awards night. I had to travel 8 hours up into the Alps, where we were running a photographic retreat, which we run every year. We're in our 10th year next year. And I'd spent the first few days with our first set of clients. We had 2 workshops back to back. And I think you rang me. I just got back from being out on the riverbed. And you said, what have you been up to today or something? And I said, well, it's -7 this morning. And we got out and jumped in a helicopter and flew up to 7,000 feet and got put on a ledge where we could photograph the sunrise. And Then we flew back down and downloaded our cards, had breakfast, flew over to a little shepherd's hut next to the river, where we took a chef with us who cooked on an outdoor barbecue, a brunch. And then we went back, and then we were driving up the river, crossing streams in four-wheel drives and things. And I've just got back, so I need a hot shower and look at some pictures and do a bit of an AV after dinner or something. And you looked at hang on, slow down. What did you just say? And I must admit, I appreciated what you said, because sometimes you have to pinch yourself. But look, I've got to say, as exciting as it is, and this is maybe a bit of Tony philosophy, it's very important that we keep a balance. And, you know, I've got a family, I've got grandkids, I've got clients back in Perth, I've got other things I'm involved in sort of a consulting thing. So I have to remind myself that there's a balance. However, when you are in those moments, it's very important to enjoy them. And yeah, we had a great time, mate. Like you go from one morning, the third last morning I was there, it was blue sky when we got up, and in the evening it was snowing and the place was white and people were going all freaky. And because you got to remember, a lot of people down here where we come from, we don't get to see snow that often. So they're all right. And you'll appreciate this, but trying to give a presentation after lunch with people, and we had a fairly dark background, but to the side are two windows. We're in a beautiful 6-star lodge, and they could see outside, and that's when it started to snow. And I'm trying to do a presentation, and I could see all these eyes the heads were facing me, but the eyes were going to the sides. And after about 10 minutes, I looked at Peter and I said, "This is silly. No point me presenting anything, because all they want to do is go out and take pictures in the snow." So yeah, very lucky.
No, it's fantastic, mate. And you'll get to see Tony's work today, among many other things, and he'll introduce that more than myself. But I just want you guys to know, if you've ever seen aerial photography, probably over the past decade, Tony has really revolutionized what aerial photography is. Not only capturing aerial photography, but just your eye to spot it, to capture it, to isolate it, to bring out the best in it in post-production. And I remember a few years ago, like there was one night where, you know, back then you needed a grand award to become a grand master. You had the points and you needed a grand. And that year, I mean, you cleaned up, you won the grand, you got your grand master. And the work is always stunning. And it's incredible, because every time I look at my feed, whether it's on Facebook or Instagram, your work is uniquely recognizable, which is interesting, because you've literally shot all over the world, and certainly the perimeter of Australia, and that's another story altogether. But to be able to shoot so many different landscapes and straight away people know it's yours is quite incredible. So I'd love for you to touch on that during your presentation. But yes, Tony, take it away, mate. What makes a standout image? And I can't wait for this presentation myself.
All right, well, let's see what happens. Okay, you should all be able to see a slide. How are we doing, Joe? We're good to start?
All good, mate.
So, well, thanks again for joining us. And I know that there'll be people looking at this later on, but if you have any questions, just fire them back through Jerry or Melissa. Look, I suppose the biggest question people ask is, how do I get my images to stand out in a world where there's billions of images floating around? And I forget the numbers, but it's just some ridiculous number that, you know, millions and millions of pictures every day. So how do you get pictures to stand out? You know, there are certain influencers on social media that have figured out how to get certain images to stand out. I learned a few years ago that the color red on social media attracts 50 to 100% more likes than any other color. And I experimented with it, and it was right. So there's a little tip for you to start off. If you are trying to get people to, you know, give you a thumbs up or whatever on social media, then red maybe stands out. And it's interesting. I think that whether it stands out on social media or whether it stands out when the print comes around at a judging competition, you know, there are certain little things that we need to be aware of that will capture the eye. I suppose, you know, when we think about our general world, we are completely bombarded with how we should be doing it, what's going to stand out, and we can lose ourselves. And I think, Jerry, that's one of the things you and I see when we teach, is that people are lost. They're trying to find out who they are. They want to make their own mark. You made the wonderful comment and observation, and which I appreciate, that when you see my work, you kind of go, oh, that looks like Tony's work, or that is Tony's work. And I think, you know, we need to be careful that we don't spend too much time trying to be like everybody else, and we forget to be, the person that we are, because, if our life were a movie, then the best person who can play us is us, because no one else is going to play us better than we do. So being yourself is the secret to achieving your highest potential. Being someone else is just a pathway to being second to somebody who's probably the better person. But I find over the years I've started to become more comfortable with who I am and what I do. I think it's important that you discover who you are and you know who you are, and then you become confident enough to define yourself. And what's this got to do with imagery? Well, 30 years of competition, I believe in the long term, that in order to be successful in competition, the real success of competition is, does it contribute to your growth as a photographer? Yeah, it's wonderful to receive an award and get up on stage and have a gong and put a ribbon around your neck and all of that. And, Jerry, you've won any more than anyone at places like WPVI and things like that. But, and while that's good, if it's not helping you grow, if it's not helping your business grow and things like that, or if it's not contributing to you moving forward, then really it can just be a drain of your energy, and it can be a real roller coaster ride where I think people can start to define themselves in the wrong way. And, often when I'm coaching and mentoring people who are entering competitions, I point out to them that, don't define yourself by your wins and losses. If otherwise you get a gold this week and you're a legend in photography, and the next week you don't get a gold, or you fail to get even a bronze or something, and you've plummeted to the depths of, being the worst photographer, and that can't be how you define yourself. Go for the averages. A little tip I've taught some of the people I coach is that if you're going to enter competitions on a regular basis, then work out your score for that year, the average score, and then beat that average score next year. Not did you get a 96 or an 82 or an 85, but what was your average score? And even push yourself and go back over the years and say, well, here's my last 6 years of scores. Here's my average score over 6 years. What can I beat that? Can I beat 83.6 and get an 83.7 or higher? So, knowing who you are and defining yourself, and you get a lot more enjoyment out of your competitions too, because if you know yourself and you define yourself, and if the judges look at it, let's face it, when we put an image in front of judges, we know it's worth 95 to 100, and sometimes the judges don't, and that's not their fault. They're doing their best. We just have to accept that some judges don't get it.
Can I ask you a question, Tony?
Sure.
So it's interesting because as you're growing as a photographer, I think many of us get ruined by, there's that fine line between being inspired and being intimidated. And then when you're coming into your own and you're sort of finding your own style, obviously a lot of people will go back to the winners gallery for inspiration. How do you take that inspiration from the winners gallery? And how do you interpret that for your own submissions? Is it, okay, I know where the baseline is. I know where I need to be. Some people will emulate and tweak and chop and change. Some people might be tempted to copy, or some people say, you know what, I know what's out there. Now I know how to need to be different. How do you do that?
Look, I think it's not something you can do by looking once and saying, well, okay, that's what won last year, and now I know what to do. I don't think you can do that, because every year there are so many contributing factors as to why somebody wins. And history experience has taught me that if you can get an 85 or above, then you had the chance to win. And I think I said this to somebody up at the retreat the other day in the mountains, that if you're scoring between 78 and 84, then you're producing work that's on the cusp of winning awards. You're starting to get consistent quality. You kind of know how to produce the print or produce the image if it's digital. If you're getting 85s and above, an 87 can easily be a 93. It's part of if you understand the way the judging works, if you understand average majority rules, if you understand how challenges work, and watching judging, you'll start to get it. You've got to realize that an 87 could easily be a 92, a 95, and that suddenly puts you right in the finals. So
yep.
looking at the winners gallery, ask yourself the question: what do I notice? Walk along the gallery, and you're not going to agree with all of them. You're not going to love all of them. You might, but most people would say, I don't really like that one. I love that. I can see why that's in the finals. So when you feel yourself saying that, or responding like that, ask yourself what it is that you respond to. Like, what is it that you like? Is it, and I'm going to go through this in a minute, is it the color that grabbed your attention? Is it a textual quality if it's a print? Is it the emotional response that you're having? What is it that grabbed your attention? And as you build that library of responses and library of experiences, it becomes a fallback when you're looking at your own images. And that's the hard bit. When we're looking through our work, we've lost the value of impact because we know the work. We know what went behind it. We've sometimes lost the emotional impact because we've already been through that. We've processed that emotion. So looking at how other people respond, even people who are non-photographers, and sitting back, and inside each of us, there's another voice. A friend of mine just turned 60 the other day, and he made a post and he said, am I the person I was when I was 10? Because I can remember being 10 and living in a 10-year-old body. And I can remember being in a 21-year-old body. And I can remember being in a 35-year-old body and a 48-year-old body. And now I'm in a 60-year-old body. But it's the same person who remembers all these. So maybe the body's not permanent, but I am. And I thought that was really interesting. He said, so the part that's listening and watching is that third-party observer. Now, I don't want to get too far down the esoteric philosophy line, but when we look at something, there's a voice inside us that says, oh, I like that. What is it that you notice in that winners gallery? Step back and look at all of them and see what they have in common. That might help. I mean, you mentioned over the years that, I've done different genres. I started in weddings. I did just under 1,000 weddings, and many people know that story. Portrait, that's my lovely wife in Paris, that a few years back. So, I've shot portrait, I've done travel, commercial, and I think in all of them, the thing that, obviously having quality files and having simple compositions is probably something that has become resonant of my work. Simplicity is certainly something that I prefer to do. And I think, and I don't want to preempt what competitions, you should be putting into competitions, but if it's too complicated and people can't connect with it, then it's going to have a harder time doing well. Having said that, if you can make it complicated and make it easy for people to connect, now you're on a winner. So simplicity is a good place to start. And I still fall back on simplicity when I look at my work. You got to ask yourself, what are your images about? Because if you don't know what they're about, then what hope have the judges got? And yeah, we've all seen the image come up, digital or print, and one judge challenges and says, I can see, a frog sitting on a lily pad holding an umbrella and playing a flute. And the other judges look at it and go, oh yeah, I can see that too. And that's amazing. And, a bit of pareidolia cuts in, or, seeing rabbits in the clouds, and that's fine. And you may have no intention. I've been in that position where I've challenged and given someone a high score, and standing back a room later in the day, and this person's come next to me and said, thanks for getting my print up. And I said, what do you mean? They said, oh, the one with it was actually a nun in a corner holding a cross, I thought. And he said, there's no nun, there's no cross. It was just window coming in through a light, but I loved your story. But what are you taking the image for? What are you trying to do? Here's an image I used for, I was commissioned by Phase One cameras to produce images demonstrating the use of the trichromatic back, which is about, tricolor, the advantage of color. And this isn't an ad for Phase One, it's just the picture. So I had to demonstrate, something that promoted color. So I went to the Fringe Festival group and asked if some of them would help me out. And we went and did a shoot in the desert, about 5 hours drive from Perth, out in the middle of nowhere. It'd be like going out into the Nevada desert from where you are in Vegas. And, we just tried to produce images that just allowed for the colors to bounce. So that was the purpose behind the picture. But apart from that, I wanted to keep it simple. I didn't want it to be about, 3 people doing tricks that they would do on a vaudeville stage. Asking yourself, being clear in your mind what your picture is about will help drive your editing decisions, your composition decisions. What do you want people to see? What don't you want them to see? We look at images through the years, whether it be the classics, whether it be, photojournalism, whether it be landscape classics, whether it be portrait. People look at your work, at people like Rocco Ancora, the wonderful portrait, the fashion work of Lindsay Adler. yeah, so many great photographers that contribute to our community. And they, after a period of time, become a reflection of that artist, what they're about, what their personal vision is. And as you said earlier, we start to look and go, oh, that is a Jared Yoda's picture, or that is a Lindsay Adler fashion shot, and so on. And realizing that ultimately your goal, I think, as a competition entrant should be to be presenting you through your imagery, because yes, you can win awards by copying the winners, by following the principles that make a good image, and I'll take you through that. But I think ultimately, to win the game, if you like, you should be aiming to be the best version of you and producing work that is you, the work that says this is me, this is who I am. And that's really what I've done over the years. I've realized that, for instance, style. People often say, how do I find style? We had a question up in the mountains the other week, how do I develop a style? And I sort of said, well, I don't know, you do. You can try, but I think style evolves. If you sit back and just keep working hard and getting better at your craft, your style will come through as you relax and gain confidence in your own ability to see, your own ability to, compose and tell the stories, visual stories, the way you want to tell them. We will start to see your style, because there are so many micro decisions you make when you edit an image, whether it's composition, whether it's saturation, whether it's sharpness, where are you putting the emphasis, etc. And as I look back, whether it's wedding, portrait, landscape, fine art, I started to realize that my style is around simple things like shapes or lines, color and texture. And these things, this is like the language of our imagery. It's like the ABCs of our photos, and they reveal meaning, they reveal hidden narratives and things like that, purely by how we construct an image, where we place things in the image. They really do. If you look back and start to put a lot of your pictures together, you will see a common theme. I mean, here's a group of images from a couple of years back from an exhibition, or this is over a couple of exhibitions, and I look at things like that and I go, wow, there's some very simple shapes, some very recognizable shapes. People look there, they could see a wave, they can see a tree, they can see a planet Saturn, trees. There's a style that's instinctive when we allow ourselves to just go out and take our pictures. And I can't put it down in scientific terms, but there's a part of me that truly believes that when a judge looks at an image, they can see an image that's made by a photographer who's comfortable with who they are when they start seeing world-class images. I think when I look at the work of the best photographers and I look at stuff that's sort of like at the highest end, sure, we all sometimes fluke a great image, but I think if you're doing it consistently, it's happening because you're allowing creative flow. And flow is literally what flow means. It's moving, it's energy that's coming without interruption. It's moving gracefully and gently and with power, but it's got something genuine behind it. And I look at my work and I sit back, and when I'm
you just described yourself, Tony.
Did I?
I'm saying it's energy and beauty and flow, everything that you mentioned. There's a few things to unpack there, which I'd love to comment about.
Sure.
First of all, if anyone's watching right now, if you got any questions, Melissa's in the background there. She's going to be feeding us the questions. If you've even just got a comment or a question or a thought, it could be related to what we're talking about. It could be general, and I'll pick a time that we can actually ask them. What I loved about what you said, Tony, is about style is a reflection of who you are. And I want to sort of add to that. Style, I believe, is and your photography is a reflection of who you are. More importantly, who you are at the time. I find that, when I fell in love with Melissa, my work became more passionate, more sexy. When I was younger and I was going through a darker time, I found my images to be a bit more dramatic. There's times where you're a bit more fun and playful. And I think what's missing sometimes, that perfect balance between influence and copy, so to speak, is that I think we all learn a craft by copying. I guess that's what we all do. But there comes a point where we lose that purity, that rawness. And you know, and I believe that we're all creative. Like when we were kids, we made an imaginary friend and we're all very creative. And then somehow we sort of grew up and then, you know, shit became real. And then all of a sudden you sort of forgot to be creative again. So I'm very curious to see where this conversation and the presentation is guided with creativity and how you interpret things in front of you. So love what you're saying, mate. It's amazing.
Thank you. You know, I'm sort of well documented as being pretty proud these days to have 3 grandchildren. And I remember being on a little island. We took him on a holiday. He was 3 years old here, or 3.5 years old. And he wanted to go up that lighthouse and he wasn't allowed to. It's too short. You got to get up because it's a circular staircase. And, you know, you had to be over a certain height and he wasn't. So he was devastated. He was in tears and not chucking a tantrum, just really upset. His mum and my wife went up. My daughter and wife went up there. Anyway, after they'd been up and come down, we went over and had a coffee. So I'm sitting at this little table, you know, beautiful island, and he looked at us and he went over and got his mum's phone, and he walked over and we were watching him. And I thought, he knows what he wants. And he gets over and he took a couple of steps to the left and a couple of steps to the right, and he held the phone up as all 3.5-year-olds know how to do. You know, made sure he put the phone up to mum's face so it turned on, and got to the camera, and away he went. And he took this photo, and the little photo you see down the bottom here, that's the photo he took, unadulterated, just basically that's it. So he knew what he wanted. He pressed the shutter for a reason. He was trying to say something, capture something. Do we know? Now this is 3. I think all our life when we first pick up a camera, we know what we want to say. And the trick is, yes, you've got to become good at your craft. There's no shortcuts. You know, you know how much time you put into learning how to use the camera so it becomes second nature. You don't want to be thinking technically when you're trying to be creative. Different part of the brain. We want to get to the point where our camera gear is second nature. So you've got to do the work. You've got to learn. And then editing's the same. If you want the editing to flow, if you're going to be someone who edits, you don't have to be. But if you are, then you need to learn those tools. And you don't need to learn all of them. You'll never learn all of them, trust me. You just need to learn the ones you need to know to do what you want to do. And I'll say that again. Whether it's using your camera, using lighting, using software to edit, you need to learn to do what you need to know to do what it is you want to do. The rest of it is a waste of time and energy until you need it. And people go out and they try to learn everything. You know, I edit in softwares such as Capture One and Photoshop. I am not a Photoshop guru. I use 3 or 4 basic things to do the things I want to do, but I know what I want them to do. And I'm pretty good at using the things I need. And if I need a new tool, I'll go and learn it. So as we progress into talking about, you know, what's the basics behind the thinking and what are some of the tools, and I'm not going to go into software and things today or editing, but I just want to get into the head and get you thinking in the right way. You take a picture like this, which is one of my all-time favorites. It's an older image. It's probably 18 years old, taken on Venice Beach, actually, in near LA. And I just remembered watching this guy walk across this long stretch of sand with all of that stuff on his back. And it's funny, Jerry, you said at the time when you met Melissa, the pictures became passionate and sexy and all. I mean, why wouldn't they? You know, that's a slam dunk, isn't it? But I remember being on there and having a lot of things going on in my head and watching this guy. And all that kept going through my head when I was watching him walk was, he looks like he's got the world on his shoulders. And I felt exactly the same way. And, you know, it was, I forget what was going on in my life, but it was just like that burden that you're bearing, that you heads down. And I kept thinking to myself, look up, look up. And then I was thinking, if he looks up, I'll have to go and ask him if it's okay to have his picture, but he didn't. But the whole point of the picture, and all I've done is taken out a couple of little bins that you have down there. That's all that's been taken out. It said so much for me because you've got the footsteps behind him, which tell us where he's come from. You can see the space in front of him where there are none, which tells us he can go anywhere he wants to. But his head's down, he's just trudging along, all this weight on his shoulders. So why are you taking the pictures? What stories, you know, what are you trying to say with your pictures, and why are you trying to say it? I think answering some of these questions, or at least just asking them, can give you a start as to what makes great images. You know, every image we take, it's an opportunity to share something, to visually say something that hasn't been said before, or to share a story or a visual about something in a way that hasn't been seen before. That's exciting. It doesn't matter how many pictures are out there. No one sees the world like we do, and I'm going to, as I said at the beginning, I'm going to lean on a few of my friends so the viewers don't have to be just watching my aerial landscapes and things like that. But
Actually, Tony, can you go back? Can you go back one? I just want to ask you something. So, it's very interesting to me because I know you do like these incredible workshops where people are in a helicopter. You're all got your cameras out of a helicopter, and you're photographing the same thing.
Yep.
Why are yours outstanding? Why, when you've got 4 or 5 people, maybe with the same camera, the same lens, you've literally got maybe 6 or 7 feet to play with, and I mean, exposure isn't rocket science, but composing that. One second, that's Zoe. Composing and recognizing the magic. No, baby. Oh. Composing the image and recognizing what is magical about where you are. Why do yours stand out when someone next to you is just not seeing it?
Do you remember the movie A Beautiful Mind?
Yes.
With Russell Crowe?
Yep.
He's a code breaker in the movie. And the way they get the message across of what he sees, how do you understand? How do you see through the eyes of somebody who's neurodivergent? And that's what that story is about. And he could look at a page of letters and numbers, and he could see a code that was embedded in that page of letters and numbers. And the way that they portray that in the movie, the effect they use is he looks at the page and certain letters glow. Do you remember that? He would look at it and certain letters and numbers would glow. When I'm flying around looking down, I see, again, I'll touch on this. I see shapes. There's certain shapes in the world that we all respond to. The shape of a cross. It doesn't matter where you're from. Everybody has a meaning that they give to that shape. It can be to do with politics. It can be to do with religion, whatever. But we all, there's so many things. Songs have been written about it, movies, crossroads, a cross. It's an arcade. It's a symbol that's been around for a long time. Circles, tree pattern. So I look around for things that I know are iconic symbols. And things that people will resonate with for whatever reason. And then it's about understanding that what I'm trying to bring through is, if I'm just going to skip back to a picture, if I go back to this one, so this picture is a river or a stream that's running into a lake, and it's on a salt pan. So everything you see above and below, can you see my cursor?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So everything that's above and below that curvy line is just salt lake. And I saw this river, and when I saw it from 90 degrees, but I also looked at it from 90 degrees. A lot of people, when they look at something from above, still try to picture it as if they're on the ground. And I saw this hill, this set of hills, and this image is called Continuum. It was the signature piece in that exhibition, Continuum. And I looked at it and I thought, to me, that resonates or reminds me of the continuum of life, that we move through life. We have ups and downs. People often talk about ups and downs. And when we're at a high, things grow and blossom and, the gold happens. But we have those dips where it might be dark dips or it might just be a barren dip. But we all come into the world and we all leave the world. And I look at it and I go, that's a shape that people will look at and go, oh, it looks like rolling hills. And they will have other things that resonate because there's a word for it, but I can't think of it. They're like legacy symbols, if you like. So for me, when I'm looking down, I'm trying to keep it simple. I'm not getting caught up in the sort of oblique perspective where you look at, and there is a wow factor, and I'm probably over the wow factor of being up there looking, going, wow, look at this. I mean, back in New Zealand last week, flying over the Alps during the snowing, and you're looking across mountain after mountain after mountain and watching the snow in the distance. And there's a wow factor, and there was people in the helicopter, $3,500 an hour, if you don't mind, and they're holding onto the camera and not taking pictures. And I'm going, take pictures, look. But they were just gobsmacked, But I'm looking at the rolling and I'm looking at the atmosphere and I'm thinking, there's a feeling here. How do I capture it? So I'm not really answering your question. I don't think there's a hard and fast rule. It's a recognition of something that I see within this broader landscape, like Russell Crowe sees the letters and they stand out, and then putting a frame around it. I mean, whether you're a landscape aerial photographer or a wedding photographer, what are you doing at a wedding? You see a bride and a groom. There's a special moment. You put a frame around it. That's what you do. You pick up your camera. You don't want everything else. And then you decide how much of the extra stuff around them will contribute to a strong picture. Do you want lots of other stuff and give them context of people and that? Or do you come in very close because it's all about that magic moment when they're just face to face? You're putting a frame around something that you responded to, that you recognized, not just visually, but instinctively. You've responded in terms of the physical, but you've also responded in terms of the emotion. You know, they talk about a glowing bride, and I've been in a church, and I remember looking through the lens, and I literally saw a bride glow. And I took the camera away, and there was no lights on her, and she was just, and I'm looking, she was so happy. You know, your beautiful wife, Melissa, she glows. And I remember her on her wedding day, that smile on her face. Mind you, you had a big smile too. But, you know, you would respond to the energy of that moment as much as you're responding to the physicality. The craftsman in us as photographers looks for things, not make sure no line coming out their head, no horizon cutting through the headline. You know, is the light good? We don't want shadows under the eyes, all of that stuff. We get that right. But we respond to something that's deeper than that. And everybody's got it. The problem is a lot of people don't trust it. And I think that's what we need to help people do, is trust it.
Yeah.
You know,
awesome,
we're not, and I suppose that's what I'm saying here. You know, we're not photographing just people and places. This is a picture from Rocco. He's not just photographing a person. He's photographing an era. He's photographing a legacy. He's photographing look at the color tones. Look at, he's made all these decisions because it's not just about what does this guy look like. You know, you talked about, you know, your beautiful wife. And I mean, she's got these beautiful flowing lines. You look at my continuum image of the rolling hills, same shape. That shape, which is kind of very similar to what's called a Hogarth curve in art. And a Hogarth curve is a shape such as rolling waves, rolling hills, lay a body, particularly a female body, on its tummy, nude. You got the arch of the back and the buttocks coming up. There's this beautiful shape that we as human beings respond to. And, you know, look at this. You've got it. Beautiful curve, emulated by some of the softness in the Taj Mahal in the background. So we're not just photographing people and places. This is an image which I put in the awards in probably around 2012, 13, when it there was a year where they said there was no deadline. And I thought, okay, I'm going to put in my last wedding, one of my last wedding shots. This is from 2000. And, you know, for me, that's the words are what the picture's about, not the picture. But the picture is the vehicle that visually is going to carry those words and carry that memory for that bride. And when we're capturing, whether it's a bride or whether it's, you know, something like this, which is an urban construct, it's one that most people know my work from. Back when I was doing more compositing, which I don't do these days as much. But it reminds me that when it comes to competition, are we looking for standout images? Or are we looking for images of something that stands out? And I think it's standout images and images of something that stands out, because some of the best imagery, some of the best award-winning photos are not of special things. They're just great pictures of the ordinary. But there's no doubt that some images are of something pretty special. So let's have a look at some of the reasons images might stand out. You know, I hope this is okay, but it's too late, I've shown it. You know, images that have impact. When you see a picture like this, which is a cesarean birth, it doesn't, you know, the fact whether it's the blacks are too deep or, you know, is the color tone right? Is the color balance right? Is it sharp? It almost doesn't have to be sharp or anything. It's purely impact because of what it is. It's the moment a human being has come into the world. impact can come in so many ways. And when a picture like that comes in front of a judge, they stop and they look again. Images with the impact, no question, automatically start to invite the judge to give them a higher score. Rare
Tony,
moments.
can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So stay on this one for the moment. How do you so I know that you've played every role in competition in our industry, but as a judge, how do you, if something is just emotive, like it just could be someone who's going through cancer, it could be something in wartime, or it could be just something that you can't help but get emotional about. How do you divorce? No, I wouldn't say you divorce yourself, because you sort of have to embrace the story, embrace the emotion, but it also has to be a well-crafted image of that emotional response. So how do you balance your heart wanting to give it 100, but your brain says, well, this could have been cropped better, composed better, retouched better, blah, 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 like all those different things. How do you reconcile that?
I don't think that's hard, Jerry, because as a judge, we learn that there are criteria. It's a competition. Let's remember that it's a competition, and at the highest level, we're recognizing outstanding work across multiple considerations. Technical, is it technically good? Because if it's not, we shouldn't be giving it 95. It's not technically good. And I don't mean it's got to be sharp and all those things. It might be, as you say, it could be a very impactful war scene or very emotional. Is the emotion so loud that it overrides the technicalities? And are we looking for technicalities that don't belong in that image? For instance, some of the most emotional images are better when they're not perfectly sharp. Like the sharpness almost puts too much of an edge on it emotionally. So as a judge, I look at it and I say, right, does it communicate? And is that communication powerful? Because I think the gold awards should be for images that are powerfully, you can communicate with power, whether it's through emotion, whether it's through impact. They communicate something, and they communicate in a way that's not done all the time. Because if it's done all the time, then, and if everybody's doing it, that's what's called high standards of professional practice. I also look for what the photographer's brought, because if they've stuck their camera down an alleyway in Bangladesh and found, some poor human being that's not had a good life and just gone click and presented it to us, it's a poignant moment. But I'm asking myself, am I purely, because all I'm purely going to award you on is basic camera craft and being in the right place at the right time. And yes, there's a certain score you would give that, but have you given me something to think about? Have you contributed to the way I'm going to interpret this picture through the composition you chose, through the way you've treated it, or have you just gone, levels, black point, white point, auto color, and there is the picture? No, I want to see what you felt about that moment come through your pictures. I think that's important.
Yeah, I love it, mate. Great comment. I love it.
Yeah.
Tell me about this image. This is insane. Like this is, it's like everyone's dream, but also everyone's nightmare. So
Yeah. So this, believe it or not, true story. This is taken in a place called Shark Bay, and I have another image which has at least 1,000 sharks in it in this vicinity, because this picture goes, the actual area goes way out, and there's sharks everywhere. The ones that you can see in this image are the bigger ones. They're probably 3.5 to 4 meters. And this is a humpback whale. It was caught in the channel, and got told by another pilot we're about to go out flying with a client, and we were heading in a different direction. She said, you might want to go out to the channel. There's a whale out there surrounded by sharks. And I thought, there's going to be half a dozen sharks. Bloody hell, when we got out there, it was just phenomenal. We were out there at 9 o'clock in the morning. I took this picture. We went back at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It was still going, but it didn't survive. So the whale is turning and it's rolling, because you can't see it here, but the sharks would grab onto one of its pectoral fins, and the whale would roll to flip it off. And, I've got a picture of this whale upside down tracking, and 8 sets of sharks in pairs following it. It's just crazy. Wow. Crazy. So that's what I mean by a rare moment. You take a picture like that one back in 2020 at SWPP. That won me the SWPP Photographer of the Year, that award. It's the only it's the only nature photo I've ever entered in a competition. It's won multiple things, so it's crazy. Look, emotion can be what grabs people's attention, and you don't have to get super clever with emotion. A nice family portrait of, you know, grandma, grandfather in a special moment, just talking to each other, you know. And it's funny when we think about rules, people get hung up. Their eyes are shut. You know, their eyes are shut, but that's what makes it work. So as a judge, I look at for what is expected, and if it's not what I expect, does it work? Does it contribute to a strong piece of communication? Does it touch me intellectually? Does it touch me emotionally? Does it touch me spiritually? Is it well crafted? All of these questions are going through your mind. And
just
the thing
to
is,
interject there, mate, just real quick.
sure.
Just for the importance of people watching, whether it's like now or in the future, just so you know that when we give guidance to the judges in terms of definitions and how to score and things like that, there are things that have been popularized in our industry that are considered good practice, or, hey, this is considered quote unquote a mistake. But just so you know that we always encourage the judges when they're looking at an image and they see something that's often considered or popularized as problematic, or this could be worked on, we encourage the judges to look and say, was this done on purpose? Is the rawness of that particular, again, that thing that would normally be considered a mistake, is that done purposefully, and is it contributing to the message? Because at the end of the day, I mean, you know, pick a movie, for example, that you love, and every so often you'll see a movie scene that goes against the grain, or like Pulp Fiction, for example, those weird angles and changing the continuum of how the story is told. All that stuff, it might feel a bit weird, but then it's sort of like, wait a second, it contributes to the overall feeling. So the directive from us to the judges is, don't just take it on face value, just go a little bit deeper and then appreciate it for what it is. And if we can't get over that hurdle, then of course that'll be reflected in the score as well. So
yeah, absolutely, Jerry. And, you know, intent. Is there intent? And can we see the intent? If they've done something unexpected, why? Can you see, does it contribute? And you know, you mentioned that things change. Now, this is never, God, that's nearly 30 years ago, bloody hell. And this is before Photoshop and all of that. This was done with projectors and all sorts of things. And at the time, it, you know, got a lot of notice, put it that way, and did really well and featured in articles in Europe and things like that. These days, would it do as well? Probably not. It'd possibly still get people to look at it twice, but then they just dismiss it as bad compositing and things like that. So, if you're thinking about your work and you're thinking, okay, what are the judges looking for? Well, a lot of judges, I think, would say this to you. They'd say, make me stop, make me look, make me feel, and make me think, and perhaps look again. And if you can do that to a judge or to the viewer, then you're halfway to getting a good score, because they're going to consider it. They're going to start to sort of go, well, how did you do that? Why did you do that? It seems powerful. What is it? There's something simple about it, but there's also something deeper. For me, my best recommendation to most people is simple things with purpose will go a lot further than trying to get complicated. And I see people try to get too clever with effects and all sorts of things, and they don't pull it off. And if you don't get it right, then what's going to happen is, you know, you're going to get pulled down because of the bad technical side of things, and people miss out on what you were trying to say. So understand the power of simple. So I realized this morning, when you look at that, isn't it interesting? If you take one little line out, what have you got?
That's awesome. That's so good.
So I've had this around for a while now, and I should change the color of that little there. And it's mine, Jerry. It's mine.
No. So your trademark. It's all good. It's all good. I love it.
So a while back, one of the ladies I've been working with for a few years, and we were talking about editing. How did the judge see so quickly? And I said, what do you mean? She said, well, an image comes up and the judges seem to just look at it and go bang, 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 and they see the score. And she said, how do you do that? And I said, okay, it's interesting. So I went away and I came up with this little thought flow, which I think is pretty cool. And a lot of people are using it and finding it useful. So hopefully your viewers have a chance to see this. The way to remember it is IC quickly now, ICQM. And what those letters stand for is this: impact, content and composition, quality, narrative, and aesthetic. What do I mean by that? Well, whether you're a judge or whether you're somebody walking through an exhibition or whether you're just looking at your own work or you've got somewhere and you're about to take a picture, impact is the first thing you notice. When a print comes around for a judge, we talk about, does it have impact? Well, does it come around and you go, wow, what's that? Does something grab you? What is the first thing you notice? The next thing is you look at it and you go, well, what is it? What is in the image? What is it? Is it a picture of a tree and a house on a hill? Is it a picture of a bride running down a road? What is it? What are the elements? And composition talks about how those elements are arranged within the frame. Is she running away? Is she running towards us? If it's a boat on a horizon, is it moving to the left or the right? Is it on the side? Is it in the middle? How are we arranging? Because all of these things contribute to the narrative. Is it sharp? Is it a good exposure? If it should be a good exposure. Are there details in whites and blacks? If we need details in whites and blacks. Because if it's a silhouette, we don't need details in the blacks and so on. Is the color feel right or does the color feel wrong? And is it about something? Is it got a narrative? And I know judges are great at making up narratives, but is there a story? Or is it maybe not about the narrative? Is it more about celebrating just the beauty or the design? Is it purely about that? And as a flow, if you like, you could sit there and look at the picture as a judge and go, right, I've noted, this is what I noticed. Here's what it's about. Here's how it's arranged. Yes, it's got good quality. It's sharp. The color balance is working really well, technically very good. And it's got a powerful story, or it's got a lot of emotional impact, or whatever it is that's grabbing you. As an entrant putting a picture together, ask yourself, what's the first thing people notice? And if the first thing they notice is not what you want them to notice, what can you do about it? How can you edit it? Can you use your editing or your composition to increase the attraction and decrease the distractions? So I'll say that again. Very simple workflow. Increase the attraction, decrease the distraction. Whether you're setting up lighting, whether you're setting up your camera, whether you're composing an image, whether you're editing an image, what do you want people to be attracted to? Make sure that is easy for them to find. What don't you want them to be distracted for? Do what you can to remove the distractions. How do you do that? You can crop it out, you can darken it, you can edit it out with cloning, etc. So depending on the rules of the competition. So this is a very simple thought flow process, if you like. Impact, content composition, quality, narrative. You can use that. And the way to remember it, ICQM. Keep in mind, as you said, things do change. My aerial in 2009, my first aerial ever, was out of a hot air balloon. In 2011, I won some awards with this picture. Well, now every man, and I was going to say every man and his dog, but every man, woman, and child can go out with a drone, pop it up above the beach while you're still drinking a pina colada and, having a snooze, and you've got your picture. 2013, I won the Australian Photographer of the Year with a series of images of salt lakes. That's been done a lot. 2016, I started to get more in touch with my feminine side and things become softer. A couple of years ago, become a little more sophisticated with my aerial abstracts. So things change. And as we said earlier, our images in a lot of ways are an expression of our experience. Now, as a wedding photographer, it's the experience of the wedding that you've been privileged to contribute and be part of, to observe. Your pictures are an expression of that experience. As an exhibition photographer or somebody who produces fine artwork, a lot of my work, my fine artwork, can be summed up into one line. When I said at the beginning, know who you are, know what your pictures are about, I am witness to the dance between the water and the light. I am mesmerized by water and light and the transient nature of those things. So I'm always looking at these things and thinking, how can I make use of that? And by following those sort of principles, I understand that if I can put images together, and here's just a few exhibitions where they demonstrate to people whether I was responding to color or perhaps the shapes or the textures, the visual language, if you will, like color, tone, texture, and form. And when we start looking at our pictures and saying, do I make it sharp? Do I make it add contrast? Should I give it rich color? Ask yourself, what is the picture about? Is it meant to be ethereal and calm? Well, then, put it on smooth paper. Go for something with a lower contrast. Don't make it all dramatic. If it's meant to have a high energy, then maybe the color can have extra saturation. there should be a congruency in this language that we're using, if that makes sense. And if you think of color, now what does color do? Just the color aspect of your pictures. It helps create mood or atmosphere. It can make us actually feel warm or cool. If you think of a portrait for a family, for instance, and there's plenty of portrait photographers, I'm sure that part of Icon, when you present a family portrait, you don't have a cool color balance very often, because most people want something slightly warm because it feels warm. It feels more, engaging. So remembering that color can contribute to all of those things. It can contribute to, depth. It can contribute to impact, for instance, one of your great images that I love. It can contribute to mood, just the color alone. Forget what's in the picture. Tone, for instance, tone can contribute to atmosphere. Contrast and dropping contrast gives you depth. It gives you perspective. High key images can contribute to the soft, ethereal, angelic nature of a bride's dress. Texture has so much to offer, just the texture in your pictures. So as a judge, I'm looking at a picture and I see contrast being used to bring out the textures. Maybe it's just someone's face, and texture in the beard, the texture in the lines, the wrinkles under the lines, all of these things bring out character. I'm using texture, simple tools. Texture reveals, here's a snowstorm out of a car. Texture is the thing that's really giving you the understanding that I'm in the middle of a blizzard. So texture contributes to lots of different things. It can make us feel calm because it's a smooth texture. It can make us feel uncomfortable because it's rough. This is the language of pictures. Through texture, we can reveal a feeling of masculinity or a feeling of femininity.
And speaking of language, because we're both Australian, just for those who don't understand what the hell Tony's talking about, it's texture.
Oh, texture, sorry. Texture, yeah. I mean,
no, I do the same thing. I'm like, texture, and it's like texture. So yeah, so texture.
I mean, you look when I zoom in, you can see the texture on the top of the water, which gives you the ripples, and then you got the shape of the things there. Shape, form, shapes. Sometimes it's shapes, and shapes are really interesting because shapes can trigger responses due to their symbology or archetypes. As I said, the cross, the tree, an arch, a circle. These are all archetypical symbologies, and we respond to them as human beings. It can drive narrative. It can make people go somewhere in their thinking before they've even really understood what they're looking at. And that's part of the basis of the aerial fine artwork that I would do. Squares and rectangle shapes, whether they're in your wedding shots, you've got windows and doors, they're bringing strength and stability. Circles and lines, that image of Melissa in front of the Taj Mahal, that curve, it's soft, it's movement, it's expressing femininity. And, both males and females have masculine and feminine sides, but it's emphasizing that. That's part of the language that's being used. Curves soften the image, so on and so forth. And you can see, the straight lines in this image, that's man's influence. The circles is nature. We look at an image like this, which is shot up on one of the Great Lakes near the Salt Lake City, and or not the Great Lakes, but Salt Lake City area. And you look, and everybody looks and sees an oak tree or a tree, and yet we know we're not looking at that. As I said, iconography. I mean, there are shapes that we look at, and the first thing you see when you look at that image, for most people, is not a salt lake. It's something entirely closer to home with a more maternal influence. And, I looked down and as soon as I saw that shape, I thought in my mind the words Mother Earth, So I use those.
No. You just thought boobs. Let's just.
I'm being polite, Jerry. I'm being polite. But you get it's about nurturing, and that's why it's got a warm color palette. So if I did this in a blue, cool color palette, it clashes with the message of nurturing. So even though it's just sand and water, I'm getting a message across through symbology, through color, through softness around the outside, and through shape. Like it's all contributing to what I want people to feel. Perception and reality. Oh man, you can have so much fun with these things. And over the years, you've produced work, Rocco, so many photographers, and you look at it, you go, man, that really screws with your head as a judge. And you go, that's clever. How do they do that? I've got this picture here. I shot on a trip in one overseas, and when I show people, you look at it, yeah, okay, so it's a picture of hills and that. But what people don't realize when they first look at it is it's upside down, because that's the right way up. This is the top of a gorge. This is the sort of side wall of the gorge, and this is up the top. And when you look at it that way, you accept it, because that's right. We see this shape of this triangular, which looks like the shape of a hill or a mountain going up. So we accept it. We don't question it. But then when you see it the right way up, you go, holy crap, look at that.
Yeah, that's messing with my head right now. That's crazy. Yeah, that's insane.
So there are so many things that we can include in our pictures, which we don't require clever plugins or anything. It does come down to the ability to see. Here's an image of two water, 7,000 feet above the ocean, seeing two different color tidal areas come together and create what is actually a cyclone in the water, or tornado in the water. Looking through the shadows of clouds underneath the waters of a salt lake, which is pink. It is really this color. It's actually the beta carotene that they mine it, and it's the beta carotene used in cosmetics. But you see these petrified trees in there. Something as simple as a dried out riverbed can look like a tree, which gives you, the narrative that I'm looking for here, which is part of the Girt by Sea project, where I flew around Australia over a month. It's the idea that we can go in any direction we want. And as people entering competitions, I would love people to remember that. Yes, it's a competition, and yes, you've seen what won before, but you can literally go any direction you want. We want to see you try different things. In this particular trip around Australia, we jumped in a little plane and flew for 31 days, 6 to 7 hours a day average, little 4-seater plane, which was quite an interesting trip on lots of levels, which we won't go into now. But over that period of time, we were trying to show what the words Girt by Sea mean. And for those of our American, well, for those of you who are probably listening, you won't have a clue what I'm talking about, let alone the accent. But in the Australian national anthem, there's a line that says, our home is girt by sea. Girt is a Scottish word, and don't ask me why, but our national anthem was written by a Scotsman in 1890 something. But girt means surrounded by. Think of girth as in belt, girt by sea, and that's in our national anthem. And I wanted to take pictures that demonstrated what that looks like. So there's a reason behind the pictures. So I've crammed a bunch in there, Jerry. I know you said half an hour, don't go too long. And yes, you said I talk a lot. And yes, you're right. There's so much I could talk about when it comes to creating images that stand out.
Yeah.
But I'd like people to maybe take this away, that some of the things I think are important are that keeping it simple. I see so many people try to enter competitions and get too clever. And there's nothing wrong with being clever, but simple can go a long way if you do it right. And sometimes simpler is easy. Remember, our judges only get really 5 to 10 seconds to make up most of their mind about what they're going to do with that image. And that's not a long time. So if you don't get the message across, and a simple message is easier to get across than one that's all complicated. Creativity starts in your head. It's not going to be in the software or the cameras. Whether it's in the editing process or the lighting process, I'm sure many of you have watched Jerry's lighting workshops and things like that, or other photographers' workshops, and it looks simple, but creativity starts in your head. Sorry, someone's just knocked on my door. It's completely distracted me. Inspiration is everywhere. Read that. I'll be right back. Sorry.
No worries, guys. Well, I'm really excited about what Tony's saying. Because as I'm watching and learning from Tony, I feel like what he's basically saying is be yourself unashamedly. And I love that saying, like, be yourself, everyone else is taken. And I find that having the images literally come to our home for the past over a decade and seeing everyone's perspective is overwhelming and quite exciting. I find that what's interesting is that when you totally own your perspective, I feel like everyone should and is at the point where they can say you are the best at what you do, because there's only one you. There's a unique sort of bunch of elements that come together that make you unashamedly you. And that's what we're seeing from Tony. So Tony, show us what you're...
You got to laugh. The knock on the door was the postman bringing back my images. You said the words as I sat. as I said, Dad, you said the words, when the images come to our door. These are
Oh.
my images from New Zealand. I've just returned from that competition where you were talking about where I won the Australian Dog of the Year, but there they are there. And you
That's
probably,
awesome.
Melissa would recognize that case with all the stickers on it. How
That's
ironic
fantastic.
is that? So, yeah, um, color, tone, texture, form. When you're looking at your pictures and you're editing and you're printing, make sure everything's congruent. If it's meant to be soft and ethereal, don't go printing high contrast, heavy-handed. Print softly. Or if it's an image on the screen, don't have too much contrast and so on and so forth. If you want drama, if it's high energy, yeah, give it a bit more saturation. Make sure that the way you present your image is congruent with what you want people to take away and congruent with what's in the image, what's the content. Yeah, as it says there, be you. Look, we've blitzed through that, and I suppose if I summarised it all, it still comes down to simplicity, and it still comes down that everything starts with you. Learn the basics, learn what you need to do to be able to show your images the way you want to show them. And if you see, we talked about emulating other people. I think the trick to emulation is not to emulate what they do, but look at people's work whose styles and techniques you like and learn how they do it so that you can use their tools, if you like, their language to express yourself in your way. And, be like a judge. Sit down with your image, turn it off, look at it and go, what's the first thing I notice? Because that's what a judge has got to do. Then ask yourself, that ICQM, what is the picture about and how have I got everything arranged in the frame? Does it make sense? Does the composition strengthen the story? Does it make it easy for the judge or for a viewer to look at the picture and go, I know what it's about and I know what you want me to see as being important? Is the quality there? And if it's soft, that's fine. Does the softness of the image contribute to what you want people to take away? If it doesn't, if it's meant to be sharp, then make sure it's sharp. If there's no detail in whites and blacks, that's not necessarily a crime. Even though you might hear judges say there's no details in blacks and no details in white, there are times when it works, but there's a lot of times it doesn't. So make sure that's got everything that you've done in your image works and has a reason. And if it's about a story, can I find that story? If it's about a narrative, if it's about an aesthetic, if it's a recognition and a celebration of the beauty of a perfect rose and you've lit it, that's fine too. It doesn't have to have this big long story. But can I find that? Can I find that?
Amazing, mate. There's a couple of comments, a question or so as well. So I just want to sort of make sure we have a bit of time for that. Gary's asking, with that picture that actually was upside down, that it actually looked obviously correct the way you first presented to us, but then the optical illusion happened and then you sort of, yeah. So when it's being judged, the judges may not realize that it's an upside down shot and this could take away from the impact. Is that correct? Does it matter?
Yes. And it's a very, very good point. I'm glad Gary's asked that question. Thank you, Gary. There are images that I would not enter into a competition because the competition space does not allow for the context. If you take a picture like this and entered either that one or this one, I don't know that would do well in a competition. Look, it might do okay, but I don't think that one's going to actually, judges are going to look at it and be able to easily in 10 seconds work out that it's actually upside down.
Yeah.
So
yeah. It's interesting too, because I know that you've mentioned under your breath. I just want to be clear here. You've mentioned under your breath sort of several times about having 10 seconds or whatever, and talking about print. So obviously, as far as the icon ecosystem, remember that your entries are in print if you get to the finals, and of course you enter.
yeah.
Certainly, when the images get judged for the very first time, the judges are encouraged to sort of look at the image, take their time, look at the scoring definitions, look back at the image, and some images can take 20 seconds, some images can take 2-3 minutes to actually score. So it's a very interesting process. So, but I love the fact that you're paying attention to print, because certainly that's the ultimate goal of where we're going with that stuff as well. But
I think though it's also fair to say, Jerry, that even when you got, like, we judge online competitions and you can take as long as we want, I still feel that in that first 10 seconds, that's when the impact's going to come.
No doubt. No doubt.
And impact is a powerful thing. You know, this picture of Rocco's, when you look at it and you realize that it's actually one shot, you know, like that's really clever.
Yeah,
And
I mean, I've
that's,
seen the raw file of this. I
I
mean,
know,
it's it's insane.
it's
It's
crazy,
like
isn't it?
it's obviously the sun. I know exactly where this is in Melbourne. The sun is about to set. The light is hitting, these pigeons in the foreground. Obviously, just whether you see a love heart, whether you see a signature, whether you see a book that's open. I mean, you've got the two birds in the top left, the three in the middle, and then the figure on the right being backlit. I mean, Rocco. I mean, he's sort of along with you. There's very few people that just. Oh my goodness, it's so. I mean, is it effortless? That's the thing. How does when you photograph, and I know it's more now subconscious, you don't overly think, because I often say to my students, like, the more you think, the less you feel. But at this point, and I even say with Rocco, I'll look at his recent work. I'm like, I mean, I love you and I hate you at the same time. Like, how is it? Is it effortless, or do you work your ass off for it to be effortless?
I think it's instinctive, and I think there's a difference. I
Can
think
when you're answering that, can you stop sharing your screen? Because I want people to see your face as we finish
I
off, and
just,
I've got a few
yeah, sure.
comments from people and all that kind of stuff. But I'm
Okay.
sure that be fun to.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, yeah. So tell me about that.
Is it effortless? I think it comes down to trusting yourself, and you can trust yourself when you know your craft, when you know your tools. And I keep emphasizing, you don't need to become the world's biggest expert on your cameras, on your computers, on your lighting. You just need to learn to do what it is you need to do to get done what you want to do. Like, there's people out there who make magnificent images, they're world class, and they always shoot one light. They don't have multiple lighting setups. There are people who never use lights. They always available light. So, for those who are into editing, I use Capture One and clean my files up and get them to a basic setup. And then I go into Photoshop, and 99% of my stuff is curves, or maybe with the odd saturation layer, and masks. I don't use plugins. I don't use, all sorts of things. I just use those, and I basically paint back what I want. So is it effortless? I think when you become a master of your tools, it's like watching a master at anything. And I'm not saying I'm a master of my tools, but it's like watching somebody who's a natural horse person, or a musician pick up a guitar and just suddenly rap out a riff. And did that happen straight away? No, it was always in them. But until they could train their body to express what it was they were feeling musically through that instrument, it wasn't effortless. No different, and I've used this 1,000 times, so I apologize if people hear this and say, oh, I said that before. Driving a car, Jerry, the first time we drive a car, we have an unconscious incompetence. We watch somebody next to us and we go, that doesn't look that hard. I mean, does it really? You're holding wheel. So you get in behind the wheel, you press the accelerator, and you run into a tree or something, like you're all over the shop, you're oversteer. Then you gain conscious incompetence. Now you know you don't know what to do. So you practice and you train and you consciously become competent. You learn, and you got to think your way through it. And it's difficult to be creative when we're using that thinking side. But eventually it becomes second nature, and we gain an unconscious competence. Most people at our age drive around, they don't think about the driving no more than they think about taking the next breath. And I think in terms of imagery, I've done over 400 hours as an aerial photographer, which is more than a lot of pilots. And when I'm looking out, it is effortless. I can see something and quickly grab it while I'm talking to somebody, or shoot it between and under an armpit, because often when I'm teaching, I'll see something, but they're in the prime seat, and I'll just sort of like click. And then we'll come back and they'll look and they go, when did you get that? And I'll say, well, it was right in front of you. I was pointing at it.
Mm-hmm.
It's because I've done so much of it. And there's a book by Malcolm Gladwell called Blink, which talks about the 10,000 hour principle. I mean, you light naturally. It's instinctive for you, Jerry, because how many lighting setups would you have put together? Thousands. You pose instinctively. And the beauty about learning to pose instinctively, when you've practiced it enough that you don't have to think about it, is you can then you can just be yourself with the person and have that rapport. And when we have that rapport with somebody, we're not worried about putting this wrist back and cocking the fingers and turning it this way and all of that. suddenly we're just being ourselves, and there's a free flow of energy, and we get the emotion out of people because we're free flowing. So why does it come natural? Because I think you put the hard work in. But
Yeah.
keep it simple. Keep it simple. Learn the simple things, do them well, and then just keep adding to your repertoire.
Yeah.
Add a little trick to your repertoire. When it becomes something you can do second nature, you'll suddenly be doing it, and you're just adding a tweak.
I love what you said before, because you said often we will hear the words master your craft. You said master your tools, which is so much less intimidating, because at what point do you master your craft? You really don't. I mean, that's what being an artist is, in my opinion. I think it's being a professional student. You're a lover of the learning process, but I think the starting at that point, I think, is really clever. Like, you know what, if I want to do, like you look at someone like Lindsay Adler, who's just, prolific in what she produces. And, certainly she'll expand her sophistication and range, but that there's some certain tools that she uses, and the impact is there. And whether you have a different subject matter or a different crop or a different color palette or whatever, ultimately that baseline is there, which I think is great. But I want to mention a few comments, Tony, and then I want to ask you one more question before we sort of wind up. But Swati says,
before you
"Oh,
do,
please go for it. Yeah, please."
can I say this quickly?
Yeah.
That photo I showed of my grandson Matthias with the iPhone photographing the lighthouse. That's the pure example of it. He's a kid. He's 3 years old. He doesn't know the craft. Or he knows this. He knows how to turn the phone on by putting it at his mum's face, and it goes on. He knows where the camera. He knows where the camera icon is. He knows how to take the picture, and he knows what he wants to show. That's all he knows, and he got it right. And as he gets older, he will master more tools. But he can take a picture, and he does. We go to family things. I give him my phone, and he's got his own camera. He's got an old D2X. I gave him, and he shows people. So you don't need to know everything. You just got to need to know a couple of things well, and use them, and then build on your skill sets.
I love it. It's so simple when you put it like that, but it is, in essence, it actually is. And in terms of, doing well in competition, I find that, yeah, when you start hearing a lot of critiques in a row, if you're hearing critiques all day, or you're watching them in a row, like there's 400 critiques right now in the Icon website, I liken it to watching a movie about spiders and walking away itchy. And what happens is that you end up photographing with almost fear of making a mistake. And I find that that's what's missing, is that childlike perspective of the world, where you're not encumbered by all the crap that we hear, we listen to, whatever, because that purity is just so beautiful. And I think that that's what we have to balance, that being so, oh my, I don't want to make a mistake, I don't want that lighting to be bad or whatever. Like, if you're photographing specifically for competition, I think what you've given us today, Tony, is sort of some freedom to play, freedom to express, certainly with parameters and guidelines as to the common denominators, as to what judges are looking for. But I'm really loving it, and certainly so are many people here. Swati says, such words of wisdom. Tony's work is so incredible. Heidi says, so many great Tony nuggets of wisdom. Thank you. Dory says, this live is so good. Thank you. Janice says, thank you so much, Tony, for sharing this amazing knowledge. So it's, yeah, Tony, look, you've always been incredible. You've been an incredible friend to me personally, us as a couple. You're one of those people that the conversation is never shallow. It's always deep. When you ask how we are, it's always, you want to know the answer truthfully. It's not flippant. I love that. And certainly I know that, your knowledge and wisdom sort of can literally be months and months. And you've given us a bit of a glimpse of that wisdom today. But so thank you on behalf of the community. Certainly what you did for Icon in general in the inaugural year and the months leading up to it, certainly. And we say this all the time, Tony. So sometimes you're not privy to it, but we say we just couldn't have done Icon Awards without you, because the sounding board of someone whose experience, we would be mad not to not to listen to your counsel and to follow your lead in many ways, but it's been amazing. I want to ask you a question. How do I not freak out or be upset at a bad score? How do I get over a score that I didn't believe I wanted or didn't believe I deserved? How do I get over that fear of entering, period, let alone if I do get a score that I didn't want to, or didn't think I deserved? How do I get over that? How do I do that?
I, first of all, I think we have to acknowledge that getting a low score hurts our ego. You know, it's no question our pride hurts, and we're creatives. Our creatives are tied in with our egos and our pride. You know, it's part of who we are. And when we produce something, we create something, there's an ownership. It's a child. It's part of us. You know, it's one of our prodigy. And kind of to have it get a low score is like somebody's saying your kid's ugly or something. You know, like I think we need to prepare ourselves for the fact that the 5 people who are going to give a score, if it's 5 people, are 5 people who have an opinion. And like anything, if we walk into an art gallery, does everybody like every painting? No. I remember talking to an artist at the gallery that I have represent me, and he's also represented. And we were talking about people, you know, how do you produce work that you know is going to sell and all of that. And he said, I learned a long time ago that with over 8 billion people on the planet, if I produce a painting, I don't have to have 8 billion people like my work. I just need one, the one that's going to buy it. And it changed things for me a little bit. I thought, you know what, you're right. So when I enter a competition, am I entering it to win? Maybe that's part of why you do it. Am I entering it to be reassured that I'm good at what I do? Well, I hope not, because I'm in trouble if that's the case, because I'm now putting my future and my confidence and my satisfaction and my pride in the hands of 5 people who are going to make an opinion up in this very short space of time. So when I get a bad score, and it does happen, I look for the positives. And I think the question is to get, and I'm trying to find the right words, because I am sensitive to the fact that when you're starting out, it can hurt and it can make it hard. But I think we need to, it's like looking at, you got to get across a road and you got to get across a path and it's all muddy, and you got to get across that path. But the only way to get across that path is to slide through the mud a bit. And you can either not cross the road, or you just accept you're going to get dirty. And when you get to the other side, you'll learn. And I think when we enter competitions, we accept that, yes, we'll get some images that are going to do well and some that won't. And they won't necessarily be the ones we think. So often the ones we think do well barely get through, and the ones that we just pushed in at the last minute suddenly go great. And all that should remind us of, and we should get excited about, is that it's not written in stone. It's not black and white. So we always have a chance. It's not a case of if Jerry enters, Jerry will win, or if Tony enters, Tony will win, or if Rocco or Lindsay. It's not that case, because anybody can win. And it's an opportunity that you can choose to contribute to or participate in, where you will receive feedback. And feedback is king, any type of feedback, because there's nothing worse, I think, as an entrant now, than to put something in and, okay, it's a good score, but let's say I get 86. And we've brought in comment on every image these days. We never used to have that. And you get 86 and someone says, yeah, well, you know, look at it, it's a great image and deserved an 86, next print. And that's kind of almost deflating, because it's like, well, give me something, feedback. In some ways, getting a 72 and they say this, 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 and this, even if you disagree,
it's more valuable, yeah.
Even if you disagree with every comment, it reinforces in your own mind what you're trying to do. Yeah. So use it as an opportunity to grow. That's it. It's an opportunity to grow. And as I said at the beginning, look for the averages. Don't let yourself be, don't define yourself by one score. Don't even define yourself by a bunch of scores. Define your progress. If you're going backwards, why are you going backwards? If you're improving every year, just keep doing what you're doing. Just keep doing what you're going to do. So I don't know if I've answered it. I don't know there's an easy answer, and talk to people. Don't be afraid to walk up to judges and say, I got it. This is what I entered. I got a bad score. I don't know many of the judges, Jerry, that we use at Icon or in other places, that if someone walks up to them and says, I'm a new entrant, or I've only entered a couple of times, I got a 68 and a 72. Do you mind giving me a bit? I don't know anyone who's not going to take 5 seconds and say, let's see, show me what you got. Show me on your phone. Let me see if I can help you. I certainly would give the time, and I know you would. So it's a scary thing, but all good things come to those who are prepared to step out. What is it, the SAS in Australia say? He who dares wins. Doesn't mean you'll win the competition, but you'll win something.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
don't know if
Mate.
that was the pearl of wisdom you were looking for.
No, it's fantastic. No, I mean, like, I love it because you've got to the heart of it. At the end of the day, we can sugarcoat it all day long. At the end of you've been entering for 1 year, for 30 years. A score that you don't want or you didn't think you deserve stings. It does. And I just feel like that they have been motivating for me a lot more than the successes. I mean, right now, Tony, I mean, you've added another trophy to the, another couple of trophies to the cabinet, so to speak. But I can probably guarantee you that those scores that weren't that high pushed you to where you are now. And it's just one of those things that you've got to suffer through, and you got to go through the pains. And at the same time, and this is the difference, I'll often refer to the analogy of a sport like tennis, for example, and people think, oh God, I can only print if I'm one of the finalists. I mean, first of all, like when you enter, you get your scores, you get your your silver distinction, gold distinctions, you get that, you get your accreditation points, and very affordably. And to Tony's point, when you're checking out, make sure and again, this is not opportunistic, I'm going to be honest with you, none of that money even goes to Melissa and I. Half of the money goes to the judges, half of it goes to the actual
Take
software
advantage
company
of the critiques.
that supports it, right? So
Critiques.
yeah, so get a critique. So when you're actually submitting your images, you'll ask for, do you want a critique? It's those video critiques, 2 to 3 minutes, is just absolutely invaluable. And I don't know about you, Tony. I know that we discussed it actually, that the process of critiquing an image in this new platform, let alone the 400-500 images we got online now, are just fantastic. So make sure you do that. And just a reminder for those watching live or at least close to the deadline. So we are now 26th of August in 2024. You've only got till the end of the month to take advantage of the early bird deadline. And and the reason why we did this, Tony, I don't know if you've been privy to it, but last year we said, you know what, no early bird, no nothing, and we didn't know we are going to have a competition about it until a week before the for the deadline, because everyone enters last minute. So if you've got some time, the next 4 or 5 days, enter and you'll save $10 an image. I would rather not take your money. This is purely a deterrent so that you enter quickly, so that we can spread out the images. We can make sure we've got them in. And don't worry, if your time is more valuable than money, you've still got an extra month till the end of September. So just know that early bird deadline end of this month, and then the overall deadline to be part of this competition is the end of September. Question, mate, or thought?
Jerry, just quickly, I was thinking, if you wanted to get a master's in medicine, law, social welfare, computer science, whatever it is, you'd be studying for years and years and years, and you would be required to submit work. You would be required to submit work that would get all sorts of scribbles all over it with B minuses and C's and so on and so forth, and A's and whatever. We're photographers. We're in a different world. We can go and study those things, but think of entering competitions as your, quarterly semester report, and you put the images in like you submit an essay or something, and you say to the senior people, the lecturers, the tutors, what do you think? And they tell you what they think. And if they said, yeah, good job, well done, see you next year, you don't grow, you don't learn. But if they say, yeah, love your work, this one here, maybe do this, this, and this one does, I don't respond to. That's how you get and earn a master's. A master's or an associateship or a grand master shouldn't be seen as just how many points you accumulate because you kept entering prints and you figured out the game, you figured out the rules of the game. Think of it as I'm on a learning curve. And as I enter my work, I'm kind of I'm not obliged. I don't have to, but if I consistently enter those essays, those visual essays, those pictures, and get my report card back and act on that report, whether it's great job, done this, but this is what you could improve or whatever, whether it's a 65, which says you didn't have the impact, there was problems, find out what the problems were. Even if you don't get told by the judges, ask other photographers. But that's what we should be doing. And then when you get to a master or a grandmaster, you hold your head up and you say, I friggin' earned it. I earned it. I took the knocks, I took the commentary, I took the feedback, and I worked on it. I listened. That's what a master should stand for. That's why you enter competition.
I love that, mate. I absolutely do. It's interesting. Like every single grandmaster, like no one got there by accident. Every single grandmaster, you look at them and you're like, you know what? You committed to the craft for that many years, produced exceptional work, and inspired a whole new generation. And that's exactly what you're doing, mate. So thank you for being
Pleasure.
you. I always say that to you. Thank you for being Tony Hewitt. Everyone universally loves you, mate, and is inspired by you. But we're both wearing the I Am Iconic shirt right now, but you are truly iconic. Thanks for your words of wisdom, and mate, we can't wait to witness your wisdom and the evolution of what you do on a personal level with your work, let alone how you've influenced Icon and you'll continue to in the next generation as well, mate. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, everybody.
No worries.
Thanks for your
Joe.
comments.
See you later. Thanks, everybody. Take care and good luck.